today's global order is not working for everyone. In fact, I would go further and say it's not working for anyone. Our world is facing existential challenges, but the global community is more fragmented and divided than at any time during the past 75 years. Even the Cold War era was, in some ways, less dangerous. The threat of nuclear war was real and existential. That's why the United States and the Soviet Union agreed on arms reductions and controls and other mechanisms to prevent mutually assured destruction. Today, in our multipolar world, we still face the nuclear danger. And we are dealing with two more threats with existential dimensions: the climate crisis and the risks of uncontrolled artificial intelligence. And we have been unable to take effective steps to respond to any of these existential challenges. Multipolarity has created important opportunities for balance and justice and for new leadership on the global stage. But the transition to multipolarity without strong global institutions can create chaos. When power relations are vague, the dangers of aggressive opportunism and miscalculation grow. And today we see countries doing whatever they like with no accountability. Impunity seems to be the name of the game, and so we must all be determined to reestablish the primacy of the rule of law. As the Munich Security Report makes clear, relative gains through competition between countries are being prioritized over absolute gains for all through cooperation. And crises are multiplying, linked to competition and impunity. A global order that works for everyone must address these gaps and provide solutions. Excellencies, if countries fulfill their obligations under the UN Charter and international law, every person on earth would live in peace and dignity. The problem is that many governments are ignoring these commitments. Millions of civilians are paying a terrible price, and record numbers have been forced to flee. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, nothing can justify the unconscionable terror attacks launched by Hamas on 7 October against Israel. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people in Israel's military response. The situation in Gaza is an appalling indictment of the deadlock in global relations. The level of death and destruction is shocking in itself, and the war is also spilling over borders across the region and affecting global trade. The humanitarian aid operation is now on life support. It's barely functioning. Humanitarians are working under unimaginable conditions, including live fire, multiple physical obstacles and Israel restrictions, as well as the breakdown of public order. Rafah is at the core of the entire humanitarian aid operation. An all-out offensive on the city would be devastating for the 1.5 million Palestinian civilians there who are already on the edge of survival. I've repeatedly called for an immediate and unconditional release of all hostages and a humanitarian ceasefire. That is the only way to massively scale up aid delivery in Gaza. And this must be the foundation for concrete and irreversible steps towards a two-state solution based on international law and United Nations resolutions. Excellencies, the war triggered by Russian invasion of Ukraine in clear violation of the UN Charter has no place in Europe of the 21st century. 2 years in, the cost in human lives and suffering is appalling, and the impact on the global economy has been particularly devastating for developing countries. We desperately need a just and sustained peace for Ukraine, for Russia and for the world. But a peace in line with UN Charter and international law which establishes the obligation to respect the territorial integrity of sovereign states. And around the world, from the Sahel to Libya and Sudan, from the Great Lakes to the Horn of Africa, from Yemen to Myanmar, we need concerted efforts to strengthen regional organizations and for global powers to pressure the parties to the war to come to the peace table and pursue their goals through negotiations. The recent decision of the Security Council to support African Union-led peace-enforcing and counter-terrorism operations is an important step in the right direction. Excellencies, beyond this immediate crisis, we need to strengthen the global peace and security architecture to deal with today's threats and challenges. Those who drafted the UN Charter did not conceive of the climate crisis, artificial intelligence, or cyber weapons. The new agenda for peace, to be discussed at the Summit of the Future in September, aims to update our collective security systems based on a more networked and inclusive multilateralism for a world in transition. From reform of the UN Security Council to a recommitment to eliminating nuclear weapons and the role of sustainable development and climate action in preventing conflict, the new agenda for peace seeks to update global commitments for the challenges of today and tomorrow. It includes measures to prevent the further fragmentation of global trade rules, supply chains, and more. And it calls for new norms and frameworks to regulate new technologies in the military domain. Excellencies, competition at the global level cannot obscure the divisions we see around us. Communities are driven by hate speech, discrimination, and deepening polarization. Truths and facts are being drained of all meaning in an age of deep fakes and disinformation. We are witnessing an intolerable explosion of anti-Semitism and other forms of religious and racial hatred. Divided societies are weak societies, where extremist narratives can take hold and tensions quickly escalate into violence, undermining democratic values. Tech companies should assume their responsibilities and stop profiting from the amplification of toxic content of all kinds. And we need a new emphasis on social cohesion and the security of every individual through a renewed social contract based on justice and inclusion and anchored in human rights. And this will be the focus of the World Social Summit we'll host next year.